Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Casual Criminalist. This one written by Emma. Thank you, Emma. The Murder of Grace Milane. I've never read this before. Dear audience, we're going to explore it together. That's the format of the show. So let's just jump in, shall we? When I started dating way back in 2010, Tinder didn't yet exist, but then I used to meet guys on a South African instant messaging app called Mixit. And by the time I'd left university and started working, I'd switched over to the dating website OkCupid. Alright. I'm not talking about me. This is Emma saying that, not me. I joined Tinder in November 2014. Has Tinder really been around that long? It's after my Tinder was never around when I was dating. But yeah, been together with my wife since 2011. After I'd heard about it being discussed on a local radio show, they were discussing the app in particular, and that morning they'd had a specialist in to comment on the do's and don'ts of online dating, how to set up your profile, what red flags to look out for while browsing, and the list of available singles. And which red flags to avoid when browsing the list of available singles. I feel like if you listen to a true crime show, you know those. You know those psycho vibes. Today, I'd like to tell you about Vessi, who are, definitely my favorite shoe company, possibly my favorite sponsor. I don't want to play favorites, but look, Vessi has sponsored me for a long time. They make amazing shoes. They send me amazing shoes. I get to tell you about amazing shoes. It's just a win-win. These are the Stormburst. These are the high tops with the high top. These are the low tops with the low top. Easy, right? Stormburst shoes are perfect for winter, although I've worn these in summer, or more accurately, I've worn another white pair that I have at home in summer. No sweaty feet, nothing like that, and definitely no wet socks. Winter is here. It is snowy all the time outside. And then the snow melts and it turns into puddles and mud and all of this stuff. And I just rock around wearing my high tops, mostly the high tops, sometimes my pair of low tops as well, but mostly in winter the high tops because they'll keep you nice and toasty warm. And I just rolled around with them, and they're just 100% waterproof. They're like Wellingtons or rain boots or gum boots. What do you call them in America? Like those waterproof shoes. They're just like that, except they look cool, they're breathable, it's because of Dymatex, it's perfect. Look, you'll get a pair of Vessis, preferably at my link below, and then you will never go back. Just go to vessi.com/TCC for waterproof shoes, and they go with all your outfits. It's fantastic, and you'll get 15% off your first order at checkout automatically. So that's fantastic. Love me some Vessi. You should love some Vessi as well. And now back to today's episode. Now, I can't remember what they did look out for, but I remember the list of things I looked for when browsing through the available profiles of single men in my area. 1, there had to be more than one clear picture of the guy. Yeah, just one clear picture. One picture of them from a distance looking super handsome, and you're like, yeah, but why is that the only photo? 2, photos with friends are fine, but they can't all be of him and his buddies because then you don't know who you're chatting with. 1 or 2 photos of him wearing sunglasses are fine, but they shouldn't all be of him wearing sunglasses because it suggests that he's insecure in his appearance. Or he's got terrifying eyes. 4, his profile should at least include a short description of himself, bonus points if it's funny, because someone who can't even go through the effort of adding a short description to their profile is not going to be a good conversationalist. 5, no gym or bathroom selfies, in all caps, because I don't need to date someone who's that much into his own body. Also, you just know that the first photo he'll send you once you start chatting is going to be a photo of his favorite body parts. Sounds really grim. I'm kind of glad that this wasn't around for me. Now, back then, I was a 6 or 7 at best, but I'm blonde and have blue eyes, and I'm a decent conversationalist, so I did really well on Tinder. I also followed the golden rule of online dating. Once I'd hit it off with a guy and agreed that we could go on a date. Always meet him in a public place. Oh my god, yes. It seems like, isn't this the most basic rule? First dates should always be in somewhere public. Not, come round to my house. I'll open a bottle of Chianti. Because it gives you an easy out if the guy isn't who he says he is. It also allows you to easily slip away if the guy you're on a date with starts regaling you with sad stories about his cheating ex, explains that he lost his job after falling down a ravine and injuring his back. Who fell down? Oh yeah, I was reading in the news the other day. It's like the guy who started Mango, that the fast fashion clothing store. He fell down a ravine and died. I'm like, oh my god, I thought people just fell down ravines in movies. And then offers to regularly pamper you by rubbing your feet and giving you a neck massage after a long day at work, if only you'll give him a chance. No, thank you. Most of my dates were uneventful. I don't understand, even if you are, all broken up about your ex and, all of this, no one wants to hear about that shit. Have a little awareness about what other people want to hear about. It's I don't know, that's basic socialism. That's not the word I'm looking for. Socialization 101. Socialization 101. Think about what other people want to hear. Most of my dates were uneventful. Only 3 of my dates went really badly. Others were some of the most fun dates I've ever been on, and I ended up marrying the 23rd guy I went on a Tinder date with. But there are also hundreds of Tinder horror stories out there, and today's case is one of them. English backpacker goes missing. I wish there was more that I could have told you about Grace, but as with so many of these cases, hers was a life that was cut short way too early, and there is only so much information about her available online. Grace Emmy Rose Milane was born on the 2nd of December 1996. Oh god, she's so young. She's 9 years younger than me. She was the youngest of 3 children and grew up in Wickford, Essex, in the UK. She loved hockey and was a talented artist, and after finishing high school, she pursued a degree in advertising and marketing at the University of Lincoln. She had also regularly posted photos of herself, her family, her friends, and her artwork to her social media accounts, and they painted her as a beautiful, talented young woman who loved her family, hanging out with friends, going on trips, partying, and loving on her pet dogs, a black Labrador called Maddie and a Newfoundland pup called Benson. She came from a large family, and they were all very close. According to her father, David Milane, Grace was a lovely, outgoing, fun-loving, family-oriented daughter. Grace spent her summers working to build her CV and gain some work experience, but during her final year of university, she informed her parents that she was planning on taking a gap year once she had earned her degree so that she could go and see the world. Sounds like me. Did some work to fill up my CV and a little bit of pocket money. And then after university, I was like, I'm going to go take a year off. Sounds nice. And I did. And it was great. So on the 26th of October, 2018, David and Gillian Millane dropped off an excited Grace at Heathrow Airport. Yeah, I'd basically done the exact same thing. A decade before her? Grace spent the first 6 weeks in Peru, then flew to New Zealand on the 20th of November. She spent the next 2 weeks visiting the islands and seeing the sights, going on hikes, and hanging out with her new friends before she travelled to Auckland. During her holiday, she spammed her family with photos of the things that she was doing and regularly posted photos and story updates on her various social media accounts. Yeah, it's interesting. Doing this 10 years before, there was Facebook, but I didn't even have a smartphone when I went backpacking. It was I had an iPod to listen to music. That was it. No phone. Oh, I did have a phone, but it was like a dumb phone. Different time. On the 1st of December 2018, she told a friend of hers that she was going on a date that night with a guy that she'd met on Tinder. The next day was her 22nd birthday, and the two of them were planning on getting smashed to celebrate it. She told her friends that her date was an Australian and that he worked as a manager on an oil rig. He was on leave and staying in a hotel in Auckland Central and had plans to travel to the UK in 2019, so there was a chance she would see him again after she left New Zealand. That evening, she sent a family photo of a Christmas tree that was covered in golden fairy lights and told them that she was at Sky City, an entertainment centre and casino in Auckland Central. During the evening, she also sent a message to her friends that read, "I clicked with him so well, I'll let you know what happens tomorrow." Around 7 p.m. the next evening, her family and friends back in the UK started sending her messages to wish her happy birthday. Auckland is 13 hours ahead of the UK, so her family had expected to wake up to numerous photos and messages from Grace, but she'd been quiet all day and they thought that she was just out celebrating. When she still hadn't got back to them by the 3rd of December, how many days later is that? 2 days later. Her parents tried calling her, and when that failed, they called the accommodation where she'd been staying. The staff at Base Backpackers then informs the Millane family that Grace wasn't in, and that the other residents had last seen her at 5 p.m. on the 1st of December. According to her father, David, quote, "Grace has never been out of contact for this amount of time. She's usually in daily contact with either her mother or myself, her 2 brothers, or members of the family on social media." I remember when I was there, again, not to bring up, and this episode's not about me, but it would you'd have to go to some internet cafe and go into a booth that was always boiling hot and pay a fortune to do an international call through some weird web phone. I maybe talk to my parents once a month. Just be "Hey, what's up? Yeah, I'm still alive." Oh god, what a nightmare. Now I'm a dad, I'm oh no. I'm going to be in that situation one time as the parent, wondering what the f***'s going on. Understandably, the Millane family were out of their minds with worry, so on the 4th of December, they contacted the British Embassy and the police in New Zealand and reported Grace as missing. They also posted appeals for help on their various social media accounts and Facebook groups in New Zealand, asking the people of New Zealand to help them look for Grace. On the 6th of December, Grace's father, David, flew to New Zealand to look for his daughter, and in a televised appeal to the New Zealand public, he said that, quote, "We are all extremely upset, and it's very difficult at this time to fully describe the range of emotions we are going through. While we are very grateful for the media coverage, both here and back home, we are finding the situation quite upsetting and would sincerely hope that the media continue to respect our privacy. I would like to take the opportunity to appeal to anybody who has seen, spoken to, or come into contact with Grace over the last few days to come forward with any detail, no matter how small, and contact the investigation team." Within minutes, calls started coming in saying that Grace had been spotted walking down a street or was out hiking with other people. People also posted messages on her Twitter page telling her that her family was looking for her and to please get in contact with them. The Millane family and the police followed up on every single lead, but none of them panned out. And D.I. Beard told the media that, quote, "The longer this goes on, the more concerning it is. At this stage, we're still hopeful that we will find Grace." This is a nightmare. Usually, we report that the police didn't take families' concerns about their missing daughter seriously, but this case had the potential to become an international incident, so the Auckland police started investigating Grace's disappearance immediately. That's very good. I'm glad. Good job. According to Detective Inspector Scott Beard, quote, "We get missing persons complaints every day. It's just that when you look at this particular case, an overseas tourist here by herself, and on her birthday she hadn't contacted anybody, and nobody had been able to contact her. She had gone off the radar." D.I. Beard and his team spoke to the Millane family and to the staff at the base backpackers and tried to find out what Grace had been up to in the days leading up to her disappearance. They browsed through Grace's social media accounts and got copies of CCTV footage from all over central Auckland. Teams of officers then spent hours going through the footage and following Grace's route through the city, enabling them to set up a timeline of events for the night of the 1st of December 2018. They knew that Grace had left base backpacks at around 1737 and then made her way to Sky City on foot. At around 1744, she was standing near a Christmas tree display outside of Sky City's entrance and could be seen checking her phone. After a minute, a dark-haired man dressed in jeans, a dark t-shirt, and a light blue unbuttoned shirt walked up to Grace and greeted her with a hug. I feel like the police could get into the was it on Tinder? This was on Tinder, right? Get into the Tinder app, get a warrant, look into that, and find out details about this guy. Right? Like cybercrime division or whatever. Get on that. Get that warrant. Let's go. Time is ticking. The pair then headed inside Sky City and headed toward a burger bar, where they spent the next hour and a half drinking cocktails and downing tequila shots. They left Sky City at 1914, and that was the last time that Grace showed up on the available CCTV footage. The police now knew that they had to track her date down, so once again they scoured her social media accounts and came across a comment that was made on a profile picture she'd added to her Facebook profile just 2 days before she disappeared. The comment read, "Beautiful, very radiant," with an upside-down smiley face next to it. The upside-down smiley face is confusing and also useful. The commenter was a dark-haired Australian named Jesse Shane, and the comment had been made at 21:27 on the night that Grace had gone missing. So, thinking that he might have been the man that Grace had been out on a date with that night, a Detective Constable Levinson sent Jesse Shane a message on Facebook on the 5th of December. She explained that they were looking for Grace and asked Jesse to come and see them at the police station. I get the feeling Jesse's innocent, but Jesse should still get a lawyer. On the morning of the 6th of December, Jesse called DC Levinson and confirmed that he had been on a date with Grace that night. Okay. He was then interviewed at a local hotel by 2 more detectives and told them that he'd last seen Grace at around 8:30 p.m. on the night of the 3rd of December. They took down his details, and once the interview was over, they started looking into his story. But the first red flags popped up almost immediately. Jesse had told them that he lived in Mount Eden, a suburb in Auckland, but the address did not exist. Jesse, what are you doing? This is very, very sloppy. And when they went to speak to his employer, they found out that he'd been fired on the 30th of November. According to his old employer, he'd been working as a telemarketer, but he had been making several fraudulent calls to inflate his call rate, including dozens of calls to his own cell number. Dude, are you stupid? They're obviously going to check this. His old employer also informed the police that Jesse had been renting an apartment at the City Life Hotel in Auckland Central, so a team of detectives went to speak to the staff there, who confirmed that yes, Jesse Kempson was renting an apartment there. They also provided the detectives with CCTV footage from the hotel, and when the 2 detectives left the lobby, they spotted a smartly dressed Jesse walking away from the hotel and chased him down. According to Detective Jordan, she had determined that the falsified information it provided them with was enough of a reason to bring Jesse in for questioning. Yeah, no shit. Get him in there, dude. There's a missing girl. At around 15:30 that afternoon, a Detective Settle conducted Jesse's first formal interview while the rest of the team went through the CCTV footage that they'd received from the City Life Hotel and tried to reconcile it with his version of what had happened that night. Jesse told Detective Settle that he was 26 years old and his full name was Jesse Shane Kempson. He'd seen Grace's profile on Tinder and the two of them had matched on the 30th of November. He'd messaged her on the morning of the 1st of December and asked her if she had any plans for the next day, and she told him that it was her birthday, but that she didn't have any set plans. He then asked her if she would mind meeting up for drinks that evening, and after some back and forth, Grace agreed. He suggested that they meet up at Sky City, since there was a casino and multiple bars and restaurants that they could go to. Going to the casino for a date? Feels a bit tacky, my dude. And he told Detective Settle that it was a safe meeting point because it was a public area and there was lots of security around. But that's not exactly how he phrased it. Instead, he explained that he'd decided to meet Grace in public because there was a chance that the person he was meeting that night had been catfishing him, and Jesse then had to spend 3 minutes explaining to a skeptical-looking Detective Settle what catfishing is and why a well-built man like Jesse needed help defending himself against someone who wasn't quite as attractive as they'd made themselves out to be. Yeah. Anyway, Jesse explained that the date went well. They each had around 3 cocktails and some tequila shots, and then they left Sky City. Grace told him that she was heading back to Backpackers, so they hugged, and Jesse kissed her on the cheek. The two made plans to meet up again the next day, and then they split. Jesse went to a sports bar across the road and had just assumed that Grace was planning on going to a bar that was located next to the Backpackers. Okay, fair enough. Not a bad story. The original lying about where you live and your job and stuff makes me very suspicious of you still, though. Jesse spent the rest of the night at the sports bar and drank around 10 handles of beer. What the fuck is that? By which point he was completely sloshed. FYI, handles are New Zealand's version of a pint. Holy shit! But while a pint is usually 570ml, a handle is just 440. Oh, okay, so it's like a baby beer. Oh yeah, okay. This is, the Dutch have this as well. Whenever you go to the Netherlands, you'll order a beer and it'll come and it's like so small. You're like, why is the default beer size small? Although Americans, you've also got some problems because, Emma's completely right. A pint is 570ml, but a pint in America is like 480 or something. And so you're like, why is this so small? And apparently it's just a different type of pint because the imperial system makes so much sense. A hungover Jesse woke up in his hotel. Also, that's a lot of beer, my dude. 10 handles. So that's like 9 pints, 8 pints. God damn, dude. This is a heavy night. After tequila shots and cocktails? Were you there just by yourself getting sloshed? What's up with you? Detective Settle then informed Jesse that they were very worried about Grace and that as part of the investigation into her whereabouts, they'd appreciate it if Jesse would provide them with a DNA sample. Jesse agreed, but when Detective Settle left the interview room to talk to his team, Jesse called him back and asked, "Am I being arrested for something I didn't do?" Another police officer assured him that no, he hadn't been arrested, and informed him that they were still treating Grace's disappearance as a missing persons case. Jesse audibly sighs in relief and then explains that it had been quite a shock to hear that she was missing and that he found the whole situation to be quite stressful. I don't know if Jesse's guilty. I'm beginning to think he's not, because he hasn't thought this through very well. Maybe he had another reason for lying about his details. I'm guessing that maybe Jesse didn't do this, and also it feels a bit obvious. There's too much of this episode left to go. And Jesse also needs a lawyer desperately. For the next 25 minutes, Jesse calmly sits in the interrogation room and waits for Detective Settle to return. Behind the scenes, another detective had handed Detective Settle a stack of photos and basically told him, this guy is lying. They had clear CCTV footage of the street corner where Jesse said he'd last seen Grace, and Jesse and Grace could be seen leaving the area together at around 2028 that night. Wow, okay. When did he originally say? There was more. According to CCTV footage from the City Life Hotel, Jesse hadn't been alone when he'd gone back to the hotel that night. At around 21:40 on the evening of the 1st of December, both Jesse and Grace can be seen entering the hotel lobby together. Jesse had his arm around Grace's shoulders. A grinning Grace was holding on to his hand. It was clear that at that point, both of them were quite drunk. The last time Grace is seen alive is when she and Jesse leave the elevator at around 21:41 and make their way toward Jesse's room, which was located on the 3rd floor. The next time either one of them shows up on camera again is at 8:01 the next morning, when Jesse enters the elevator on his own. Okay, everything I just said, it's Jesse. That's just like a healthy amount of skepticism, I guess. But, oh shit, dude, this is looking bad for you because you probably murdered someone. Allegedly, in my opinion, so far, based on what we've seen. When Detective Settle confronted Jesse about this discrepancy in his testimony, Jesse said that no, he was pretty sure that he'd still been asleep at 8:14 that morning. Detective Settle then calmly pointed out the fact that the camera didn't lie and asked Jesse where he'd been that morning. Bro, when they're giving you such specific details, they've obviously got video footage. Are you just dim? For a few seconds, Jesse stares down at the photo, then says, I might have got the times wrong, but if you're assuming that I was using that suitcase for something, I've still got that suitcase in my room, and you guys can have it. Bruh, where is your lawyer? What are you doing? It's like, no, there's nothing in that suitcase. Why would you think there's a body in the suitcase? What body? I've never seen a body in my life. What's a body? When Detective Settle asked Jesse where he got the suitcase, Jesse explained that he'd bought it that morning from the Warehouse, which is a department store that sells everything from groceries to furniture and trampolines. According to Google, the store in question opens at 8 a.m., which means that Jesse went and bought that suitcase shortly after the store opened its doors, despite claiming that he'd been severely hungover that morning. Jesse continued to explain that he'd bought the suitcase because he had to move his things out of the hotel that day, at which point Detective Settle pointed out that Jesse had just contradicted himself, and the majority of his testimony was built on lies. In the Sky original documentary, The Lie, The Murder of Grace Milane, Detective Inspector Scott Beard explains that, quote, while he was being interviewed, and particularly once he'd been proved to lie, we got a search warrant for his room at the City Life Hotel. We found out that he'd been living at the hotel, and had been, for several months. Following his interview, Jesse was informed that he wouldn't be allowed to return to the hotel, and the forensic team descended on Jesse's hotel room the next day. At first glance, it appeared to be relatively clean, but as soon as the lights were turned off and the curtains were drawn, the carpet lit up with the help of some luminol and blue lights. Although, to be fair, it's a hotel room. You don't want to think about it, but, you just go to a regular hotel room, get that luminol out. You're probably not going to see things you want to see. 2 large circular stains, you're not going to see that, were embedded in the carpet next to the bed. There were also a handful of bloody footprints at the foot of the bed, leading into the bathroom, blood splatter against a wall, a spot of bodily fluids on the foot of the bed, and a few spots of dried blood on the mini-fridge. The stains tested positive for female human DNA, but the chemicals that had been used to clean the blood had damaged the DNA to such an extent that it couldn't be matched to Grace. However, the presence of blood in Jesse's room gave the Auckland police the evidence they needed to confiscate his cell phone and issue a warrant for his arrest. You're goddamn right. This is the sloppiest crime. This guy's just dim. On the 8th of December, Detective Settle tracked Jesse down at a backpacker's that he was staying at and informed him that he needed to come down to the police station for another interview. Once there, he informed Jesse that they now not only had the blood evidence, but also CCTV footage from several other places that suggested that he'd not only murdered Grace Millane, but that he had also gone through the effort of trying to cover up his crimes. Yeah, really badly. By this point, a smart man would have lawyered up, but instead Jesse agreed to come clean to the police. He told Detective Settle that on the evening of the 1st of December, he and Grace spent an hour and a half drinking cocktails at a burger bar in Sky City. They left around 1914 and then made their way to a nearby Mexican restaurant. From there, they headed to a nearby bar called the Bluestone Room. We had a fair bit to drink there. Most of the time, we were sitting there, we were just kissing. I think we were both into each other. In the CCTV footage, Grace is grinning all the way. And when Jesse gets up to fetch them some more drinks, Grace drunkenly messages her friends to let them know how her date is going, and then greets Jesse with a smile and a kiss when he returns with their drinks. The two left the Bluestone Room at 21:45 and walked to Jesse's hotel. On the way there, Jesse first put his arms around Grace's middle and then her shoulders. Grace hugs him back. They then enter the lobby of the City Life Hotel and head up to Jesse's room. According to Jesse, quote, the next thing I remember after that is being in the room with Grace. We were kissing, we were talking. She asked me to turn off the TV and started talking to me about 50 Shades of Grey. Jesse then claims that Grace suggested they should try out some BDSM, but that he was hesitant since bondage isn't really his thing. Still, he agreed, and they started taking explicit photos of each other and having sex. He claims that Grace asked him to choke her and that she had insisted on it. Things heated up, and they ended up on the floor with him on top, restraining her and holding her throat like she'd asked. After they finished having sex, he went to take a shower. He then claims that he fell asleep in the shower, which is possible, I guess. Yeah, he could be just really drunk. After a long and tiring day, I've fallen asleep in the bath, but after a wild night with friends, I've found more than one of them passed out butt naked in the bathroom with their pants around their ankles, so, it is possible. Definitely possible. But in my experience, if they've already gone that far, they're usually unable to get it up and will remain useless for the next few hours at least. Anyway, Jesse claims that he woke up at some point during the night and then went to bed. Grace wasn't in the bed, so he assumed that she had left at some point during the night. He woke up the next morning and was surprised to see that Grace was still lying on the floor next to the bed. He saw there was blood coming from her nose, and that is when he realized that something was wrong. Jesse claims that he screamed to try and wake Grace up, but she was already dead. Well, how'd the blood get everywhere? Where's the blood come from? It was in the shower, it was on the fridge, there were pools on the floor, not just a bloody nose. Quoting him, "I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. I didn't believe what had happened. I was just terrified and scared." So instead of calling the emergency services or the police, he went out to buy a suitcase and some cleaning supplies. He then forcibly stuffed Grace's body into the suitcase and cleaned the room, but the entire exercise was quite gory, and he claims that he vomited several times. I think this is obviously a little bit insane, but this guy is maybe quite dumb. Or just, I don't want to, he's not very intelligent. So maybe he's just maybe this is just a non-intelligent reaction to the situation. Quoting him, "It just didn't seem right. All I could think about was what we'd shared the night before." Jesse then told the police that he had taken the suitcase and buried Grace in a shallow grave in the Waitakere mountain range just outside of Auckland. However, he continued to insist that he hadn't murdered Grace. Her death had been a simple accident. Then an unimpressed Detective Settle informed him that he was being arrested for murder, and Jesse Kempson was taken into custody. During a press conference, Detective Inspector Scott Beard told the media that, quote, "Sadly, the evidence we have gathered to this point of the inquiry has established that this is a homicide. Grace's family have been advised of this development, and they're devastated." Grace's body was recovered on the 9th of December, and once the autopsies were conducted, she was sent back to the UK, where her family held a funeral for her. Over the next few weeks, the people of New Zealand mourned Grace alongside the Milane family. They held vigils for her, built shrines in her name, and started talking about the fact that women were statistically more likely to be the victim of violent crimes than men. Wow, is that true? I kind of assumed that, men were just, men are dicks, and to women as well, but mostly I feel like men are violent towards other men for the most part. Is that naive? Maybe that's naive. Jacinda Ardern, the then Prime Minister of New Zealand, also chimed in when she made a public apology to the Milane family, saying, "On behalf of New Zealand, I want to apologise. Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't." Lies? All lies. In her article, "Who is Grace Milane's Murderer?", journalist Anna Leask started off by writing that, quote, "He had cancer. He was a hotshot manager earning $150,000 a year. He had a law degree. His cousin was an All Black. His parents were dead. He was adopted by rich people. His mates were mostly cops. He had gang connections. Lies, all lies." That's a hell of a paragraph. Jesse Shane Kempson was born in Wellington, New Zealand in 1992. His parents got divorced when he was 9, and he lost all contact with his mother. He was raised by his father and grandfather, and when his father remarried, he was joined by several step-siblings. Jesse's father's side is Maori, but his mother isn't, and it's been suggested that he never felt like part of the whānau, or family, and never felt comfortable identifying as Maori, which led him to rejecting a lot of his family's culture and traditions. According to his grandfather, the teenage Jesse was, quote, "a nice kid, but he sort of fell out with everybody." Jesse had a habit of stirring drama wherever he went. He was a pathological liar and freely stole from his family and friends. By the time he was 21, he was estranged from most of his family, and his father set an ultimatum. Jesse had to get his together and make some effort to be a part of the family, or he had to leave. So, Jesse broke things off with his remaining family members and left for Australia, where he worked as a manual labourer and a bartender for a few years. He returned to New Zealand in 2016 and in a post on Facebook apologised to his friends and family for his past behaviour, writing, "I've done a lot of reflection over time, and I've narrowed down the cause of it all. My clear arrogance and selfishness has truly affected the relationship I have with people in my personal life. I've recently been diagnosed with severe anxiety and currently take medication to keep this under control. Putting all that aside, I just want anyone who I've hurt or let down to know that I'm truly sorry from the bottom of my heart." End quote. According to his grandfather, he also came slinking back during this time and borrowed a large amount of money which he never paid back. Sounds like you're sorry and have changed your ways, doesn't it, with that? Jeez. Jesse continued working whatever jobs he could find and got into trouble for driving under the influence and being drunk and disorderly, but he also continued to lie about who he was and where he came from. According to an old roommate of his, Jesse had told her and their two other female roommates that he was Australian and his father owned a string of restaurants. He claimed that he was in New Zealand to help oversee a few of them, and then he spun a story about some renovations they were doing, but his roommate knew the owners of the restaurants and she realized that he was lying. Oh, dude, that is cringe. Got straight busted. When she and a few friends went out for drinks a few days later, Jesse was working at the bar, but disappeared soon after they'd arrived. They knew he was always going out on dates, but had spent most of his days at home. Whenever one of them was alone with him during the day, he'd start flirting with them and forcing them into tight corners, which made them uncomfortable. Yeah, no shit. Quoting, "We finally built up the courage to ask him to leave because it was a bit scary, just us three girls asking him to leave, and we felt a little bit uncomfortable with him. But he said that his mother had died and that he was going back to Sydney, so he left that night on the pretense that he was going to Sydney, and then when we came home from work the next day, he'd cleared out all of his stuff. The way it happened, the way he left so abruptly, we actually got the locks changed the next day. Very smart, good move. Excellent to get rid of him, because that is a sketchy person." According to his old landlord, Jesse moved into an apartment in the City Life Hotel in October 2018. Jesse told his new landlord that his father was on the board of directors for Woolworths and he worked as a manager there. Jesse claimed to earn more than $150,000 a year and told his landlord that he had a company car. The apartment didn't exactly fit his high-rolling persona, but Jesse claimed that he had been looking for a modest apartment to live in because he wanted to spend the majority of his income on socializing and funding his high-flying lifestyle. Jesse was your typical metro man. He was always smartly dressed and put a lot of effort into his appearance. He told the police that his hobbies included going to the gym and swimming, and he was definitely well-built and attractive. But he didn't seem to work, and he could be seen wandering around the building during office hours. According to his landlord, quote, "He appeared to have been a pickup artist. It seems like that was his full-time job, like it was all that he did." I mean, and if you're the landlord, you'd be like, okay, yeah, he's the manager at Woolworths. $150K a year, but he's not doing any work just because his dad's in charge. Curious, but believable. Initially, Jesse's rent was paid for by WINZ, which was New Zealand's old Ministry of Work and Income. Basically, it was part of an unemployment benefit. Well, that's weird. But they only paid his rent for October, and Jesse was responsible for putting the bill for November, which is when his rent went unpaid. And Jesse claimed that there was a delay in the HR department at Woolworths and that his bill should be settled soon. Of course, Jesse was working as a telemarketer at the time, but he was fired on the 30th of November, and he never paid his rent. He also went on dozens of Tinder dates in the months leading up to Grace's disappearance. He claims that he was a hopeless romantic who loved his dog and spending time in the outdoors. One of his dates described him as attractive and very charming and very chatty. But it didn't take them long to realize that they couldn't trust a word that was coming out of his mouth, and a few of them explained that there were so many red flags in their conversations that they decided to never meet up with him. When you're on Tinder, do you get a review? If you're on Tinder, like, you know, you get on Uber, you get like a review. If you like, so many people would go on a date with him, right? And then they'd be like, "That dude's creepy. Can you like give him a 1 star?" Is that how it works? That seems a bit crazy because it's like rating someone personally on their like social skills and attractiveness or whatever. But it does also seem like quite a good idea. And it would maybe let people know, like, oh, that guy's got a 3.2. Maybe he's weird. He's probably weird. One of his dates told journalist Annalise that, quote, "Most of his conversation was about him, his mother dying of cancer, and talking about his celebrity friends. A red flag appeared in my mind when I rang a former radio host who told me that she didn't know who he was." Another one of the women that had met on Tinder told Lisk that, quote, "He was telling me about his life and that his mum had passed away, and he was telling me about his sisters. He seemed quite harmless. He rang me 3 times a day. It was over a couple of months. There were a lot of red flags, so I never met him for a date. I guess I was just trying to be nice messaging him, but it got to the point where it was getting too much. I felt he was controlling." Jesse met a woman known only as Miss K on Tinder in September 2016. The two of them became a couple afterwards, and Jesse moved into Miss K's apartment in Mount Eden in November 2016. Jesse looking for some free rent right there. While they were together, Jesse spent his days lounging around the apartments when he was in between jobs, and he regularly borrowed money from Miss K. He had a drinking problem and was often physically and emotionally abusive towards her, and according to Miss K, Jesse had a thing for rough sex. "He slapped me. He headbutted me. Jesus Christ. He'd hold my throat until I couldn't breathe while he was having sex with me. Whenever he was angry with me, he'd go to the kitchen and get a butcher's knife and hold it to my throat." Bro, this is crazy. In January 2017, Miss K came home and found Jesse lying naked on the couch with weights attached to his ankles. She claims that he told her he'd been sent by the CIA to kill her, that he then grabbed a knife and chased her around the apartment. Quoting her again, "He got me on the ground, and I was in a fetal position. He was on top of me with the knife, holding it by my throat. Then he got me behind the couch in a chokehold, and he whispered in my ear, 'Time to go to sleep.'" What the is going... Maybe this guy's not stupid. Maybe he's got like a disease. Like paranoid schizophrenia. What's that one where you think people are talking to you? Like exactly like, "I'm a CIA agent." And it's like, bro, you're an Australian, like, manual labourer living in New Zealand. The CIA's not telling you shit. At some point during the night, he forced her to perform oral sex on him. That sounds like That sounds like my dude. And Miss K explained that she cried and gagged. Well, there you go. Jesus Christ. Afterwards, Miss K wrote a letter outlining what had happened to her that night, but didn't report any of it to the police. But she finally broke things off with Jessie in April 2017 after she learned that he'd been seeing other women behind her back. This sounds like a fucking nightmare, Miss K. I'm so sorry this happened to you. She then went to the police station to get a protection order against him. She detailed the emotional and physical abuse she'd suffered during their relationship and explained how he'd manipulate her into giving in to his demands by refusing to give her affection and how he'd turn violent whenever he didn't get his way. Quoting her again, "He needed power and control at all times, and when he didn't have it, he would resort back to those violent behaviours." Another Tinder date of his also went horribly wrong. Miss O was a British backpacker, and she met Jessie in April 2018 while she was visiting her mother, who also lived in Auckland. They had a few drinks at different bars in Auckland, and Miss O explains that Jessie became increasingly more affectionate as the night wore on. At one point, he leaned over and kissed her, and Miss O kissed him back. They were heading to another bar when Jessie noticed that she was messaging a friend to let her know how the date was going. According to Miss O, Jessie scolded her for being on her phone. Jesus Christ, so she put it away, after which she calmed down. Dude, that is a red flag if ever. What the fuck? They had a few more drinks, and then Jessie drove her to the motel where he was staying. They went to his room, and after a while Jessie started kissing her. It turned heated, and when Jessie started touching her intimately, Miss O stopped him and told him that she wasn't the kind of girl to sleep with a guy on the first date. Miss O explains that Jessie got angry at this and told her that she had to put out because, quote, "he had treated her like a princess and paid for dinner and drinks." My dude, what the f*** is going on in your brain? It doesn't work like this. It doesn't work like this! The two argued, and Miss O told Jessie that she wanted... It's so entitled. It's crazy entitled. And Miss O told Jessie that she wanted to go back home. However, that's when she realised that she'd forgotten her handbag at the last bar they'd been at. Jessie allowed her to call her mother and a friend from his phone, but they didn't answer, and he refused to drive her back to the bar so that she could pick up her bag. Miss O didn't have any other way of getting back to the bar, so she reluctantly agreed to spend the night in Jessie's room. I don't know, if I was working at that motel and someone came to me with that story, I'd be like, no worries, I'll call you a taxi and we'll just call it fair. You know, if you want to come back the next day and give me the money back, that'd be great. And I'll trust you on that. Or, you know, I can put you in an empty room we have, right? You should do that in that situation. I mean, right? During the night, Jessie got into bed with her and started touching her again, and despite Miss O's insistence that she didn't want to have sex with him, well, you can imagine what happened next. The next morning, Jessie took Miss O to the bar to collect her bag and then dropped her off at her mother's house. She didn't tell anyone what had happened that night, and then returned to the UK. The news of Grace's murder reached her, and when his name and photo were published in the local media, Miss O realised that they had both been victimised by the same man. The Crown and Kay. Jesse Kempson appeared in the Auckland District Court on the 10th of December 2018, and he was officially charged with the murder of Grace Millane. God, I've gone back and forward on this guy in today's episode. He did this, didn't he? He needs to go to prison forever. Is New Zealand one of those countries, it feels like it could be, where they're like, oh no, we have a maximum sentence. You can only go to prison for 12 years, and then you get out no matter what you've done. You might have committed a genocide, but then you get out after 12 years. Is that New Zealand? Does New Zealand does that? I hope not. This guy needs to be in prison forever. During his hearing, his defense team submitted a request for his name to be kept secret so that public opinion wouldn't impede his fight to a fair trial. You know, the whole innocent till proven guilty thing. Initially, this request was denied, but Jesse's legal team lodged an appeal, and it was decided that a suppression order would be in effect until Jesse's murder trial was finalized. I mean, yeah, that's fine. As much as I want this guy to go to prison and all that stuff, I do believe in innocent until proven guilty beyond all reasonable doubt. And I think that someone shouldn't have their name dragged through the mud if stuff hasn't been proven. Generally. Don't want to make that an absolute statement. But generally, I'm quite okay with this. However, this order only applied to New Zealand's media houses, which meant that journalists in the rest of the world could name and shame Jessie to their heart's content. Which they did. Yeah, do you remember when Tiger Woods was having all those affairs and you didn't see it at all in the British media because there was like he'd got a gag order against the British press. And so if you went on to like BBC, there'd be nothing about it. But on CNN, it would be like, Tiger Woods! And so, oh yeah, great suppression of the press there. BBC or whoever, not BBC. It was on the BBC, but it was, there was a famous justice at the time who was really pushing too hard in this direction, like giving those gag orders. Jessie's murder trial began on the 4th of November 2019. According to D.I. Beard, we knew we had the right person. What we had to be able to prove was the intent to kill Grace. Jessie arrived in court wearing a smart navy suit and a black shirt and pleaded not guilty to the charge of murder. He'd also chosen not to testify on his own behalf. For the duration of the trial, he sat quietly in the accused box in between two police officers. Crown prosecutor Robin McCulberry started his opening statement by explaining that Jessie Kempson had murdered Grace Millane. He then gave a brief summary of their relationship and explained that on the night of the 1st of December 2018, the two of them had met up for a date. Grace Millane went back with the defendant to his apartment. She died there. A couple of days later, the defendant buries her body on Scenic Drive out in the way to Curie's, and none of this is in dispute. What is in dispute is how she died. The Crown argued that between 10 p.m. on the 1st of December and 1:27 a.m. on the 2nd of December 2018, Jessie Kempson had strangled Grace to death. This was either intentional or a result of actions that any reasonable person would have understood could cause death. Jessie's defense lawyer, Ian Brookie, told the court that Jessie hadn't murdered Grace, her death was an accident, and had occurred while the two of them were having consensual sex, an argument that is infamously known as the rough sex defense. He would go on to argue that Grace had a history of practicing BDSM and that she had initiated the sexual act that resulted in her accidental death. To prove their case, the Crown called several detectives to the stand who all explained their role in the investigation. Detective Constable Levinson explained how she'd come across the comments that Jessie left on Grace's profile picture on Facebook, and then asked him to contact the Auckland police. Detective Constables Han and Haimuli described their initial meeting with Jessie and told the court how it provided them with a fake address. Yeah, the beginning of the dumbness. Detectives Jordan and Hames explained how they'd managed to find out that Jessie was living at the City Life Hotel and how he'd been walking towards the hotel when they left the lobby. He looked straight at them, then turned and walked away from the hotel, prompting them to chase him down. Then Detective Settle was called to the stand, and his first formal interview with Jessie was played to the court. After that, the Crown played the various clips of CCTV footage that they'd collected during the course of their investigations, and the court became a silent witness to Grace and Jessie's short relationship. In the first clip, Jessie can be seen standing outside the Bluestone Room just minutes before he meets up with Grace. He finishes drinking a beer, and then he puts the empty bottle down on the table next to at least 3 other empty beer bottles. In the second clip, Jesus Christ, if you arrive at a date with a dude, and he's got there before you, and he's on his 3rd beer, that is a red flag, right? In the second clip, Jessie meets up with Grace, and we follow them as they make their way to the Burger Bar, then the Mexican restaurant, and the Bluestone Room, and the viewer can see how the two chat and flirt with each other and grow increasingly more comfortable with each other as the night goes on. Yeah, so far also normal other than the 3 beers. While they're at the Bluestone Room, Grace leaves the table and heads to the bathroom. While she's gone, Jessie can be seen rifling through a purse for cash. He places the bag on the chair, and a few minutes later, the two of them head towards the City Life Hotel. Jessie places his arm around her shoulders while Grace smiles up at him and puts her arm around his waist, hugging him. They then enter the elevator in the lobby, and that's the last time that we see Grace. At 8:01 the next morning, a calm-looking Jessie enters the elevator on the 3rd floor. He turns to look at the camera, then turns his back on it as he makes his way down to the lobby. He's like, oh yeah, no, there's the camera, and now I must look away so it can't see me. Big brain move right there, Jess. From there, Jessie heads to the warehouse where he purchases a grey wheeled suitcase with cash. He enters the hotel at 8:14 and takes the suitcase up to his room on the 3rd floor. 15 minutes later, Jessie is heading out again, and he makes his way to Countdown Metro, where he purchases a number of cleaning materials using the self-checkout lane. Once again, he pays in cash. Really covering your tracks well. No one will ever be able to find out I bought this if I pay with cash. Completely untraceable.
No rifling, completely untraceable.
Look, I'm checking the cameras again. It's fine. Once again, he pays with cash and returns to the hotel and heads back to his room on the 3rd floor. At 10:25, he'd changed out of his black jeans into light grey sweatpants, and he takes a taxi to a car rental company. Keys in hand, he heads back to the hotel at 11 a.m. and goes back up to his room. At 14:53, Jesse is dressed in blue jeans, a new black shirt, and black dress shoes, and heads out on another Tinder date. Are you shitting me? Bro, don't go on a date. Why? What the f***? It's safe to assume that by this time, Grace's body had been stuffed into the suitcase and it was still in his apartment. When we next see Jesse, he's finishing up his date and he's wearing the same outfit that he'd worn the previous night. He makes his way back to the hotel and parks his rental car out on the street before he heads up to his room, changes his clothes, and heads out again to park the rental car in the parking garage. At 20:11, he goes back to a different Countdown Metro, rents a carpet cleaning machine and some cleaning liquids, and returns to the hotel at 20:28. At 20:56, Jesse takes the carpet cleaner back to his rental car, and when he returns to his room, he's pushing a luggage trolley. At 21:30, he's heading out again with the trolley, and the trolley has a large grey-wheeled suitcase, a smaller black suitcase, and a gym bag on it. Jesse heads down to the lobby and then pushes the luggage trolley to his rental car. When he returns to the hotel, the luggage trolley is empty. Jesse is absolutely fucked. At 6:50 a.m. on the 3rd of December, Jesse buys a shovel at a hardware store. Bro, you're a sloppy criminal. You're going to go to prison forever. It's great. You loser. He's wearing a black sweatshirt, grey sweatpants, and his black and white sneakers. He returns to the hotel at 9:30, but now his pants are rolled up, his sweatshirt is missing, and he's barefoot. He takes his gym bag from the car and heads back up to his room. 20 minutes later, he's freshly showered and is once again wearing a black shirt, jeans, and a pair of sneakers. He's also carrying a black refuse bag that's half full and heads out again. He drops a bag of clothing off at a dry cleaner's, buys another grey-wheeled suitcase and a smaller black suitcase at a different store than the one he'd shopped at the day before, and then he drives to a self-service car wash where he cleans the rental car. When he returns home at 11:20, he takes the two suitcases up to his room. So, in a way, this is a smart plan, but it's also f***ing stupid. I don't understand how someone can be smart and stupid, like this smart to like really think this through, and also this stupid to not be like, oh yeah, cameras. Like, what the f***? I mean, this would be great if you were like getting rid of a body in the 1950s. Or, I don't know, when did they start CCTV? Maybe 80s even? The investigation into Grace's disappearance starts on the 5th of December, and that afternoon, Jesse wanders around the park carrying his gym bag and is wearing a smart grey jacket and jeans. At 16:50, a camera watches on as he takes a black refuse bag out of his gym bag and dumps it into a large black trash can before heading back to the hotel. It's thought that the bag had contained Grace's clothing, handbag, cell phone, and other personal items. The items were never recovered. The next time we see Jesse on camera, it's 11 a.m. on the 6th of December, and he's dressed in a smart three-piece suit. 3 hours later, 2 detectives arrive at the hotel. We see them chasing him down, and, well, you know what happened from there. The Auckland police had confiscated Jesse's phone after his arrest, so they were able to get in contact with Miss M, the woman he'd been on a Tinder date with on the 2nd of December 2018. According to her, everything went well at first. He told her that he was Australian and that he'd only been in New Zealand for a few months. He told her that he had some experience in sales and that he was working as a manager in Woolworths. But when she started asking him about what he'd been up to that day, things got a bit weird. Quote, he told me that he'd been trying to find a really large sports bag because he plays softball and he teaches children to play softball. But it was really hard for him to find a bag that could fit all of his equipment. And we just talked about his friends. And he said, all my friends are police officers. And he said, I just met them in bars, and they invited me back to their houses for barbecues. But he said that the police were having a lot of trouble right now because a lot of bodies have been going missing in the way to Kiri's. But police dogs could only smell 5 feet deep, so if you bury a body more than 5 feet, the police dogs can't smell it. This is red flags! We also talked about the fact that I'd sat through a murder trial and I'd seen this guy being put away for life, and then Jesse said that it's just crazy how guys could make one wrong move and then be put away for life. Bro, one wrong move is like getting lost, like, or taking a wrong turn on the motorway. Not like, oh yeah, one wrong move, you can be put away for life. What the f*** are you up to? What the f*** are you up to that could put you away for life if you make a wrong move? It's very concerning. That's not a thing that a normal person says. According to Miss M, he then told her that he had a friend who'd been having rough sex with his girlfriend, but something had gone wrong and his girlfriend had died. He then told her that his friend ended up going to prison for manslaughter and that he thought it was incredibly unfair because it hadn't been on purpose. But Jesse's apparent sympathy for this friend of his and the bodies going missing freaked Miss out a little bit. Yeah, no He's like, yeah, definitely my friends. My friends who killed a girl. Quoting her again, I just thought it was really, really strange. I think I said I had to go, and he actually had to walk the same direction that my car was in, but I didn't feel comfortable walking next to him, so I just walked down the street and went somewhere else, and he walked to his car. This is why you do the dates in public. As we know, the CCTV footage suggests that after his date ended, Jesse went back to his apartment, cleaned up all the remaining evidence of his crime, and the next day he drove to the Waitakere Mountains where he dug a shallow grave and buried the grey suitcase that contained Grace's body. I guess he learned the hard way that it's a lot of work to dig a 5-foot deep hole, especially when your muscles are purely for display purposes. Yeah, it's a really deep hole. Anyway, the most damning evidence against Jesse was the forensic evidence. The best kind of evidence, yes, let's get him put away. In almost all the court cases I've watched, the autopsy photos were projected onto a screen so that the entire court could see them. But during Jesse's murder trial, each member of the jury received a flip file containing the photos of Grace's remains. They were warned that the photos were gruesome, but that a lot of the bruising on the body was the result of being stuffed into a suitcase, and that most of the damage had happened post-mortem. The forensic pathologist, Dr. Simon Stables, explained that he couldn't find any evidence that Jesse and Grace had penetrative sex that night, but he was able to determine that Grace had several bruises on her body that she'd sustained while she was still alive, mostly from hiking and going about her day. That there were several bruises on the top of her arms and shoulders, and in particular around her neck, that suggested that her attacker had forcefully held her down and strangled her. Quoting him, there was an amount of significant bruising. It was on the left side of the neck and basically extended from the jaw down. There has been significant pressure for a significant period of time and for sufficient force for that bruising to occur. The bruising wouldn't occur with the sort of gentle pressure on the neck. It has to be something more forceful than that. According to Dr. Stables, Grace would have passed out shortly after her attacker had started strangling her, but it would have taken her between 5 and 10 minutes of sustained continuous pressure on her throat to kill her. Maybe even less, considering the fact that she'd consumed a large quantity of alcohol. Yeah, it's not like, oh no, I accidentally strangled her while we were having some rough sex. Because then you'd have had to do it, you should have passed out. And then you'd continue to do it for a long time. Which obviously isn't what, no. Just no. But there weren't any defensive wounds on Grace's arms or hands, and at the time of his arrest, there weren't any suspicious scratches on Jesse's body, so Jesse's defense team argued that the lack of any defensive wounds was proof that the sex had been consensual, and that Grace's death was an accident. Yeah, but how do you explain the prolonged squeezing of her throat after she was unconscious? In Jesse's version of events, he hadn't realized that something was wrong, despite the fact that Grace would have stopped moving or responding to him long before he finished having sex with her. Once everything was over, he didn't talk to Grace, or offer to help her up, or offer to grab a towel so that she could clean herself up. Instead, he took a shower, fell asleep, and eventually climbed into bed without worrying too much over where Grace had disappeared to. I mean, we know you're a piece of shit, Jesse, but I mean, right, you are a piece of shit, aren't you? You're a huge piece of shit. But according to his cell records, Jesse was up and awake well after Grace had passed away. At around 1:29 a.m. on the 2nd of December, Jesse was trying to figure out how he was going to get rid of Grace's body. He searched for Waitakere Ranges, then hottest fire. This was followed by a search for Pornhub, where he then spent some time watching hardcore porn, while Grace's body was lying on the floor next to him, bleeding out onto the carpet. And once he was done, he took 7 photos of Grace's naked body to keep for later. Spent the next half an hour watching porn again, and then he went to sleep. The next morning he woke up at 6 a.m. and searched for large bags near me and rigor mortis. This is insane. Any reasonable person would argue that Jesse's response to Grace's death was f***ed up, but Jesse's defense team argued that Jesse had acted out of fear. According to defense lawyer Ron Mansfield, people do things when they're stressed, when they're panicked, and often a combination of both under the influence of alcohol that they later regret. He might not have done the right thing at the time out of a concern that no one was going to believe him. Yeah, bro, no one's going to believe you because it's bullshit. But the Crown had tracked down some of Jesse's other Tinder dates, and they shed some light on how Jesse treated the women he went out with. One of them, Miss A, told the court that when she'd first started talking to Jesse, she told him that she was into rough sex, and choking in particular. The two of them met up in his room that night for some mutual pleasure, and Jesse had put pressure on her throat during sex, but she told the court that it had been just right, and that she'd consented to everything they'd done, but they never went on another date. Another one of the women he talked to, Miss B, told the court that while she was chatting with Jesse on Tinder, it told her what some of his sexual interests were, which included dominance, a foot fetish, and strangulation. I absolutely believe that he was into all of this, and I believe that he was choking her. I just think he purposefully choked her to death because he's sick and it gets him off. Jesse was pushing her to go on a date with him, but his blatant sexual interest put her off, so Miss B ended things shortly after. Then Miss C described her own experience with Jesse's idea of consent. Miss C explained that she'd known Jesse for 2 months at the time and had agreed to meet up with him in October 2016. At first, their date went well. The two of them had met up for drinks, and they spent the night chatting and laughing together, after which they went up to Jesse's apartment. Miss C told the court that she'd agreed to perform oral sex on Jesse, but that she told him she wasn't interested in doing more. But at some point, Jesse turned on her and used his body to restrain her while she continued to use her body for his own pleasure. He placed his full weight on her face, and she was struggling to breathe. She fought back against him, but when Jesse didn't respond to her attack, she decided to play dead so that he would leave her alone. But it didn't work. And once he was finished, Jesse asked her what was wrong. When she told him that she'd been struggling to breathe, Jesse laughed it off, and Miss C described his response to her concerns as chilling. When it was Jesse's defense team's turn to cross-examine Miss C, his arsehole defense lawyer, Rob Mansfield, asked Miss C, "Do you think that you may have overemphasized or exaggerated what took place that night and how you really felt about it?" In response, Miss C told the court that, "Not at all. That's not a pleasurable thing. You would have seen me kicking and writhing. You can't say that I was sitting there enjoying it." The entirety of Miss C's cross-examination is sickening. Rob Mansfield kept on insisting that she was lying, that the sex had been consensual, and that Jesse hadn't held her down and sexually assaulted her against her will. I mean, yeah, it's horrible, but he is the defense attorney. It is his job, and as much as I don't like it, someone has to do it. She'd agreed to have oral sex with him and had wanted him to force himself so deep down her throat that she couldn't breathe. Well, that's unpleasant. After all, that is what they claimed Grace had done. She had seduced Jesse. She'd suggested that they should have rough sex. She had asked him to choke her, to hold her down, and dominate her. After all, they had proof that Grace had an interest in rough sex. One of her ex-boyfriends had testified that the two of them regularly practiced BDSM and that they had a safe word. And her internet history indicated that she used to visit dating sites that were set up for people who had an interest in BDSM. It wasn't Jesse's fault that Grace couldn't handle his rough treatment of her. It was her own fault for putting herself in that position, for not pushing Jesse away when it became too much. It was her fault that she had died. But as the prosecution rightly pointed out, you can't consent to being murdered, and Judge Moore would later tell the jury that consent is not a defense to murder. That's not good for you, Judge. During his closing argument, Crown Prosecutor Brian Dickey told the court that, quote, "The defendant had Grace under his grip, suffocating her, strangling her, for a total of 5 to 10 minutes, at some point of which she lost consciousness and had become unconscious and limp and lifeless, and he had to carry on. And if that's not reckless murder in this country, someone will have to explain to me what is." Very, very good. Brian Dickey's got this down. He's going to jail forever. Hopefully. On the 22nd of November 2019, the jury was sent off to decide whether or not Jesse was guilty of either murder or murderous intent. 5 hours later, they returned to the court, and the forewoman of the jury told the court that they concluded that Jesse was guilty of murdering Grace Millane. Yeah, it's pretty fucking locked down, in my opinion. On the 21st of February 2020, Judge Moore read his judgment to the court. He very briefly touched on the details of the case and told the court that he'd read and listened to the victim impact statements that Grace's family had sent to him, which he described as harrowing and desperately sad reading. When it comes to Grace's murder, Judge Moore explained that, quote, "Viewed in isolation, the actual mechanics leading to Ms. Milane's death may not meet the threshold of a high level of brutality, cruelty, depravity, or callousness when compared to other cases, but to stop there would be to view your offending in a vacuum, and that I must not do. She trusted you. Her messages to her friend reveals that she believed the lies you told her about yourself. She trusted you enough to go into your room with you alone. That certainly placed her in a position of some vulnerability, but in my view, what then happened after she entered your room made her particularly vulnerable." He then briefly explains Jesse's proven actions after he'd murdered Grace, how he'd started planning on disposing of her body, how he took pictures of her, and then how he spent his time watching porn. Quoting again, This conduct also strongly supports the statutory requirement of callousness and depravity to a high degree. It is plainly a serious aggravating factor. It was conduct closely connected in time to Ms. Milane's death. It is rightly described as depraved. These were not the actions of a man in panic. Far from it. Your actions reveal a complete disregard for your victim. This conduct is inextricably connected to the manner in which the murder itself was committed. It is conduct which underscores not only the total lack of empathy you had for Ms. Milane, but the sense of self-entitlement, objectification, and sexualization that is reflected in other parts of the evidence. For the murder of Ms. Milane, I sentence you to life imprisonment, and I order that you serve a minimum of 17 years in prison. Which isn't enough, in my opinion. Life should be life in this case. Love, Grace. According to David Milane, Grace was a beautiful, talented, and loving daughter. Grace was our sunshine, and she would be missed forever. In a victim impact statement, Grace's mother, Gillian, explains that the last photo she has of her entire family together was taken at Grace's graduation ceremony. Then, they lost Grace, and the circumstances surrounding her death did a number on David's health. He passed away in November 2020, and Gillian and her sons had to pick up the pieces of their lives and move on. Gillian and one of Grace's cousins have since started a charity called Love Grace, and on their About page they explain that, quote, "Our Grace loved a handbag. In her name, we are collecting handbags and filling them with useful items for women in need." They also work closely with White Ribbon UK, a foundation that aims to prevent violence against women by teaching young boys to take responsibility for their actions and to do their part in preventing violence against women and young girls. Last year, she was part of a team that climbed Mount Everest, to raise funds for White Ribbon UK, and a friend of hers, Karen McIntyre, told a local magazine that, quote, "Out of a tragic situation, Gillian has turned her life around and has been working closely with the White Ribbon charity so that no other family has to endure what the Millane family has been through." God, what a sad episode. Appendices. In his judgment, Judge Moore explained that the minimum imprisonment term for murder in New Zealand is 10 years. The fact that Jesse got 17 is an indicator of just how seriously Judge Moore considered his crimes to be. He also explained that 17 years doesn't mean that Jesse will be let out on parole after 17 years. Instead, he'd appear before the parole board, and if they do decide that he doesn't pose a danger to the rest of society, he'll essentially be under house arrest for the rest of his life. Number 2. Two of the women we discussed in this episode, Jesse's ex, Miss K, and Miss O, the British tourist it sexually assaulted, weren't allowed to testify against Jesse during his murder trial since they had both formally accused him of abuse and sexual assault, and their hearing took place in November 2022. For threatening to kill Miss K, for assaulting her with knives, and for sexually assaulting her on multiple occasions, Jesse received 7 years and 7 months in prison. For the sexual assault of Miss O, he received another 11 years in prison. Both sentences will be served concurrently. Oh no, not concurrently. That means nothing. He's already in there for 17 years. Add them on top, make it consecutive. Come on. So far, Jesse has appealed all 3 of his sentences. All of them have been denied. In the documentary The Lie, The Murder of Grace Millane, they explain that between 1972 and 2022, at least 60 men in the UK have used the rough sex defense to explain why they'd murdered their wives or girlfriends, and in at least 45% of these cases, it resulted in a lesser sentence or the charges against the men being dropped. Following Grace's murder, though, legislators in the UK proposed outlawing the rough sex defense and have added it to the Domestic Abuse Act of 2021. It means that men can no longer claim that a woman had asked for it as part of a legal defense. And in my opinion, it's a change that should be applied worldwide. I absolutely agree with that. I think it should. And that's where we end today's episode. Thanks for being here.